Hello and welcome to a week 3 edition of Establish the Bets. My name is Adam Levitan. Each and every Friday night this year, I am joined by King Sharp of the NFL streets, Matthew Davidow, to talk all things betting sides and betting totals. One more time for this. You guys know me. I don't think very many people long-term on NFL sides and totals. He was one of the most successful NFL bettors before getting on the other side of the counter, starting the odds making company Deck Prism, which recently merged with Huddle. So now Matt is out there taking bets, taking big bets, taking on all comers. Matt, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me, Ed. Good to see you again.
Yes, sir. Okay. I wanted to just take a quick look back at week 2. Most importantly, our Lions, hashtag restore the roar, got the win, regardless. That was very important. I thought there were some interesting line moves that I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on. It looked like to me there was a lot of money on the Panthers, which we talked about last week. That line moved. There was a huge line move, I thought, on Jacksonville, which was sharp. There was a line move, I thought, on the Saints against the Bucks. Any thoughts on some of the line moves last week or what people should be thinking about when they see lines move?
Well, I think, like you said, Adam, the Carolina took a lot of money on game day. The Saints was mostly two-way on game day. I'm not sure where it was Friday night. That obviously moved early in the week. Tampa had a lot of injuries. The early week move was obviously very, well, not obviously. I think Tampa ended up winning the game by a couple of scores, but from where the line closed and the actual play on the field, the 2.5 was probably the right line there. Where it closed. People taking 3.5, 4 early in the week definitely. You definitely had good bets. The other game, the Colts. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a game where a couple groups or a number of people that saw not only the Colts play, the injuries. I think that Jacksonville could be looked at as a little bit better in the market than I'm really giving them credit for. We could talk about that game this week. They're in L.A. to play the Chargers, who may not have Herbert, and might line with a bunch today. You might have seen.
Yeah.
And I don't know what caused that Jacksonville. I don't know how much of it was a simple rating difference between Jacksonville in the line and Jacksonville per the people betting it, or if it was more the Colts and their injuries.
Yeah, well, Michael Pittman, I thought was a big injury for them. And I don't think, you can't say, X wide receiver is worth a half point or 1 point or whatever. I don't think Michael Pittman's really worth any points, but they're so thin at wide receiver anyways. I thought that was a big injury without him. And my other thing is Jacksonville is like a team people want to bet on the rise. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, new coaching staff, like they are an ascending team that I think people like maybe more than what the market originally showed. But anyways, week 3. So I want to start with this Herbert stuff. So I was actually doing a show and I had this unabated odds screen up and I'm looking and I see 7s, 7, 7, 7. And then next thing I know, 4, 6, 5, 4, all the way down to 3. So maybe you can pull the curtain back for people a little bit with what happened today with the Chargers line.
So one thing to realize, this is a very, very thin market. Most books that have very low limits, if they take a bet, they're going to move hard. If they see other books move, they're going to move hard. And a lot of times when it comes to this quarterback news, I think we see a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out, where if a bettor sees a line moving, they automatically think, oh, that must mean he's out. And then they go to pile on too. Then somebody else sees it moving. They're like, oh, he must be out. And then they go to pile on too. And I kind of think that happened today. Suppose Herbert didn't practice. Supposedly that was planned. Now, I thought he was a dog to play early in the week. Then when I got told he was a favorite to play, I kind of just supposed that. I mean, what do I know? And I don't actually know his status. Then after practice, they were very clear to again say, no, he was not supposed to throw it all today. So, but meanwhile, like you said, the line moved, from 7 to, or it was like 6.5, 6 3/4, probably closer to that. It moved all the way from there to like, where is it now? Like the 3.25. And I think there was actually information today. Now, maybe 6 3/4 was just too high. And when people saw him really not practicing today, that was their go time to start betting. But I think what happened was not a lot of bets, but a lot of FOMO. When it started moving, it just kept moving, it kept moving, it kept moving. I would expect it to creep back up from here. I mean, this line looks low to me if Daniel's playing. So,
yeah, I mean, to me, the Chargers are one of the most talented teams. Period. I mean, even if you remove Justin Herbert, I mean, they have one of the most talented teams in the NFL. I think they can win with Chase Daniel. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting.
And how
And
good is Herbert? Like, what, 7th, 8th, 10th best quarterback? Like, and where would Daniel be if he was a starter, like 25th? I don't know
yeah.
if there's that big of a drop off.
Well, I think Herbert. It sounds like I think Herbert's a little bit better than you do. But yeah, I mean that's certainly fair. We'll keep an eye
Somewhere
on that.
between 5th and you can't put him more than 5th, right, Herbert?
Right, right.
And I'm not, somewhere in there. But he's okay.
Okay. I want to ask about teams left for dead. So, in my fake sharp, in my idiot brain, one of my best favorite things to do is think about if I went into a bar and I asked 100 people in the bar who's going to cover a game. If 100 of them say one side, I want the other side. And nobody wants to bet on Carolina, I don't think, against New Orleans, +2.5. No one wants to bet against the Jets, +6 against Cincinnati. No one's bet against the Titans, +1.5 against the Raiders. Is this a reasonable way to think about things? If everybody likes one side, in the public, I mean, and the line's not moving, is the other side the quote unquote right side? Or how do you think about these teams that just like seems like nobody in the public wants to put money on?
Yeah, I think in general, especially at this point of the season, I mean, it's week 3. These teams have played 2 games. They don't. No one is probably as bad as they looked in the first 2 games. I mean, no one's as good as they looked. It definitely you see the scenario where the play on the field gets overrated in the market. I also though don't really think that like the people in the bar have much influence at all on the market. Like, yeah, in some games, in big games, I mean, Kansas City Colts could be a game that's influenced some. I definitely expect every recreational bettor to be betting the Chiefs. Meanwhile, already it's funny because I don't know what they're in a hurry for. I've seen groups falling all over themselves to bet the Colts this week. There's lots of money on the Colts. I don't really agree with it. I kind of think the line was right at 6.5, and maybe even touch higher. I mean, the Colts could be the Colts don't have to be good at all, but definitely a scenario like you said where the Colts are the quote sharp side, and I do think 6 and 6.5 will be back gamed. I don't think there'll be enough Colt money to keep the line down.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I in my fake sharp head, I'll also like the Colts in that game, but that means absolutely nothing. Of course, a couple other spots I wanted to ask you about. San Francisco going to Jimmy Garoppolo. Is that an upgrade for you, a downgrade? I was a little bit surprised that they were a road favorite here in the Sunday night game against the Broncos.
It's an upgrade in my book for now. I mean, I think we talked about this last week, or possibly I said this on Rufus's pod the other night, that clearly San Francisco was doing the right thing by playing Lance, and it was probably maybe the best chance to win the Super Bowl. I mean, high variance, a whole season of getting better. But for this week, there's no question in my mind Garoppolo is better. He's got Kittle's back. Kittle's supposed to be 100%. San Francisco is a very good football team. They have an excellent defensive line, good defensive backs, good coaching on both sides. Got two of the top 7 or 8 skill players between Kittle, if you call him a skill player, as well as he blocks, and Deebo Samuel. Now they have a distributor who can actually get the ball to these guys versus, Lance kind of holding the ball for a long time. I think one way I like to judge a quarterback is if a play's open, how fast does the ball leave his hand? And the very best, I mean, think about how fast Aaron Rodgers gets the ball, releases the ball when the design play is there. Mm-hmm. And that speed, even if it's a quarter second, half second, that's the difference between a guy grabbing a 20 yak and a guy getting pulled down. And these guys that want to run, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with me. I love running quarterbacks. They're just not as quick to simply make the play in front of them. That's basically my knock on Russ Wilson and Watson too. And Garoppolo, for his faults, he will make the play in front of him. The play is there. He's going to throw the ball to that player in a fairly quick, for the NFL fashion. And I think San Francisco is much. I like San Francisco in this game. I think San Francisco is a lot better team than this version of the Broncos, who I think is still incredibly overrated, across the board.
Well, so maybe you can explain to people what's going on this odds screen here. Deck Prism is obviously your company. You have a 2.5 out there. That's not actually the line you put out that people can bet against, right? So I guess for people looking at this screen,
that's like our main line. Keep in mind that's not really a 2.5. So the way our system works, we don't put up anything less than 2.5. The way we see it, you can bet the money line. So rather than giving the player 2 main choices for a big bet between pick and 1, we're giving them pick and 2.5. It's just we've got pickup for probably what's fairly in line with everybody else with the same price. What you see from the 2.5, it just kind of looks a little funky. Remember, the 2's not worth much.
Yeah.
That line might be leaning to San Francisco by 0.5% or so. But it's probably close to the market without me turning away to look at it.
Got it. Understood. Okay. I wanted to bring up a concept of opening lines. I think there's so much like talk out there in sports betting and sports betting media. What's the opening line? What did it open at, et cetera, et cetera. I don't even know what that means. Like, what opener are we talking about? Are we talking about Chris opener? Are we talking about Deck Prism opener? Are we talking about DraftKings opener? Are we talking about look ahead lines? What? Because, and it's specific to this week, people are saying, oh, Green Bay Tampa opened 47.5, the total. It's now down to 41.5. So maybe you can give the people a little bit about how you think about what an opening line is and maybe this Green Bay Tampa total as well.
But I think the world of when lines are open and when people are able to bet is changing fast. Like I see a world, and certainly I'm a proponent of it, where every single game all year remains up with a price on it throughout. I don't see even like why would he even take it down while they're playing? Simply have a system that moves the line if a guy gets hurt or if a team looks a little bit better. That's where I see this going. That's certainly what our software, Deck Prism software, is aiming at. Have all lines up at all times, look aheads up the whole season. There's almost no reason not to. Now, traditionally, what you'd have is opening lines would happen shortly after the week ended.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have reasonably sharp bookmakers or handicappers making numbers based on power ratings. They were okay, but you're putting up a lot of games. You're doing it tired. For the most part, those numbers are, and the operators that are displaying them, that are taking bets on them, they know that too. And if they take a bet, they're likely to move it a bunch, much more so they would later in the week. And if you're a handicapper or the modeler, if you put your time and money into beating, say, an NFL side or NFL total, probably don't want to bet into those openers. Why? Because you're not going to get a lot down if you're putting all your time and resources, and think about the expense of you're paying people to grab the data, you're paying people to clean the data. To be able to make a good NFL number, it takes a team of people. It's not like one guy with a pencil and paper, and that operation is expensive. And to fund that operation, you can't just go make say $8,000 to $10,000 worth of bets on Saturday afternoon on a team that you like and call it good. I mean, you do the math, and you're just not going to break even. Or close, even if you're consistently right. So the level of better that you see betting into those lines is going to be less sophisticated. It's going to be a less of an opinion than, say, someone betting later in the week when the market's larger. And now we've taken that one step further with these like look ahead lines, whereas the week before the market's really thin. People putting them up are, I mean, for the most part, just guessing. No one's really betting them yet. I do expect this to change, but like we mentioned, that Tampa, I don't think anybody with a reasonable opinion would think that Tampa Green Bay this week should be 47.5. I mean, you've got Tampa's running the ball because they can't pass block. They've got no receivers. Green Bay is a super slow running team. Both teams have been playing good defense. Both teams have been playing low scoring under type games, conservative coaching. So when you talk about, like, even though I saw that Circa actually opened 45.5, that was probably the Circa Nevada. That was probably late Sunday afternoon. That was probably, basically a poorly thrown dart. And then by the time any real money could have been bet was, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday, even more so to the weekend. And, so to me, like, the opening number is like kind of the number that the first number that you could really get a big bet down, say. And like for that game, it's, I don't think that number's really moved since Monday, 41.5, 42-ish.
Yeah, and David, I mentioned all the issues in that game, and Packers are decimated at wide receiver, Bucks are decimated everywhere, including offensive line and wide receiver, and so not surprised that it's 42. It's just kind of striking, I think, for people to be like, Rodgers is playing Brady. Oh, it's 41.5.
Right.
Like,
Well, yeah, their ages are almost 100 too. It's not quite Rodgers and Brady from 5 years ago.
Yeah,
they both play amazingly well for their age, but they're still not as good as they were.
Sure. Last thing I wanted to mention before we get out of here is the injuries in Buffalo. I think even the mainstream now understands what's going on with Buffalo. I mean, they're missing like literally half of their defensive starters for this game against the Dolphins. How do you think about moving the line around when you get defensive injuries? Maybe not to frontline players, but to a lot of starters.
I mean, the danger there is that with this term cluster injuries, i.e., it doesn't really usually affect NFL teams or any football team to have one or two players, even if they're good. The difference between anybody but the best of the best and what tends to be the backup level. It's usually not that great. It's very much a team game. Coaching's important. There's 11 players on either side. But with Buffalo here, we have at least 3 secondary guys out, which means they have to dig to the practice squad, people that really aren't getting the reps. Probably going to see people on the field that were recently signed or haven't been with the team since training camp. And that could definitely add up. Now, that being said, in this case, I think it actually could be a little bit overrated because it's not a complicated zone they play. They not managed. Buffalo's success comes from rushing the passer and coaching, the coaching of the defensive backs. And I tend to think that as good as Poyer and Hyde are, I think Poyer is actually going to play, that the coaching is the overwhelming factor there. And I actually think that they'll probably be just fine. Mm-hmm. Also, when you think about who they're playing against, Tyreek Hill's running past any of those people, any of the backups, regardless. The game is going to come down to, can Tua buy time, the Von Miller versus I forget the right tackle for the Miami's name. I think Armstead's going to miss, which is going to be a big loss for Miami. Definitely an interesting game. So far, it's been a lot of money on Miami, a lot of money on over. It's really hard to come up with this total. This total's too high. Mm-hmm. And I do think it'll come down, although there's also money on the over, partially. Like I said, everybody watched Baltimore. I mean, remember I think the narratives are a little bit at play here as well. Last week, Baltimore, all these defensive back injuries, supposedly. What happened Sunday? 4 fourth quarter touchdowns. Guys are running wide open. I mean, there was, I think, 3 complete blown coverages. So even with the backups, I'd be surprised if Buffalo blows 1 coverage on Sunday. This is easily, in my mind, the best coach, the best defensive coaching, and I think they'll be coached reasonably and have a reasonable game plan and not get. It won't be like last Sunday again in my mind.
Like to Davidow's point, it's not that confusing, right? Like they don't blitz. Like they literally just get pressure with their front 4 or their front, and the defense backs play in a zone. And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting point there on the Bills.
They play a lot of cover 2. They play. I would expect a lot of man cover. I would expect a lot of man cover 2 in this game from Buffalo. But if I were coaching Buffalo, that's what I would do. Allow the safeties to stay over the top of Hill and Waddle and not let them. I mean, a couple of the bigger plays that were made where Miami has good offensive coach. McDaniel's been pretty good. Finding holes in a very weak and poorly played Baltimore zone. I think we'll see Buffalo play man. The thing about playing man, too, is you don't need a lot of practice time to play man. The guy that was cut the second week of training camp, you line him up over here, you say cover him. You don't really you don't need to read. You don't have to know what your other players are doing. You don't have to know where your help is coming from. Zone's much more complicated. So I would expect Buffalo to play a lot of man. Okay. I would expect Miami to trade. I think Miami's going to have to run the ball in this game, which is another reason this total's too high.
Yeah, I mean, dude, if they play man, Tyreek Hill is going to go and Waddle are going to go berserk. I mean, come on, they just run right past these guys. They can't stay with them.
Well, you have a deep safety. That's what the deep safeties are for. That's what you're rushing for. You're covering 7.
I love Davidow getting his hand in the dirt for the football guy take. It's the best. Okay. Love it. That is going to do it for week 3 of Establish the Bets with Matthew Davidow. Appreciate all you guys being here and checking this out. If you ever have any feedback of things you want us to talk about, macro concept, of course, feel free to reach out to me and I'll see if we can ask King Davidow about it. Good luck this weekend. For Matt, for producer Adam, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.